This is part 11 of the Craftsman Emerson Gen 2 Drill Press Rebuild Series. If you haven't seen part 10, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be assembling the motor and the switch panel. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to be doing is cleaning up some of these electrical components. Here we have the motor power cord and we're going to be reusing it. I decided not to replace it. It's in great condition other than being a little stiff. So I'm just using some disinfecting wipes to wipe this thing down and get some of this gunk off of it. And we can break out a toothbrush a little bit later and use it to get into some of those tighter areas. But for now, the wipes are doing a great job, so I'm going to stick with them. You could use the CRC contact cleaner as well to clean up this stuff, but I already had the wipes going, so I just stayed with it. That's the capacitor, and then we have the socket and then the receptacle. We won't be cleaning the switches because we've replaced those, and I've got a link for those switches in the description of the video below. Okay, so next we're going to be attaching the motor data panel to the terminal end bell. And for this we're going to use two number 4 1/4-inch long drive screws. And you can get these from McMaster Car. I think it's like $10 for a pack of 100 of them or something like that, but no big deal. We'll just drive those in using a brass punch and we're good to hook. So next we're going to be connecting the thermal protector and the terminal bar to the inside of that terminal end bell. And these wires are a little stiff. They're not super stiff, but they're a little stiff, so I'm trying not to bend them too much. I don't want to abrade them or cause them to have the shielding on them crack or anything. But there's 2 screws that hold in each one of those pieces. And then we're routing some of that wiring, and then we've got that one loose wire that goes to the capacitor. And we're just going to route it to the other side of the terminal bar there. And this is the wiring diagram from the owner's manual for the motor, which is linked in the description of the video below. And as long as you can tell what color the wires are, it's real easy to figure out where they go. So we'll just line up that end bell. Make sure we're not catching any of the wires between it and the stator. Then I'm going to kind of straddle the windings so that we're not resting on them. Then we can kind of smack that end bell in place. And at this point I completely forgot to install the ball bearings for this end. So we'll go back and do that in a little bit here. But for now we're just going to go ahead and wire all of these loose wires to the terminal bar. And then we'll wire in the power cord. So I've sped up this footage, refer to the wiring diagram if you need to know where stuff goes. But it's pretty simple to figure out. And then we've got that decal that we made to go on the inside of the terminal cover. So we'll go ahead and attach that. And and then we'll go ahead and screw down that terminal cover. Too easy. Next, this is where I realized that I did not put that ball bearing in there, so I need to pop that end bell back off. So I'm just using a bearing pusher to kind of just sit inside the bearing well and knock that end bell off of the stator. And then we'll rotate all this and get it laid out here so that we can install that ball bearing. The stator needs to sit up a little higher than the end bell. There we go. All right, so we've got one shim, and this is not on the parts diagram, and then the ball bearing. And I believe these were 6203s with special 5/8 bores. And this is some brand I never even heard of before off of Amazon. I normally utilize Japanese ball bearings when I can get them, but trying to locate a 6203 with a 5/8 bore with a decent turnaround time and a decent price was a little challenging. So we're just going to seat that bearing. We want to make sure it goes all the way down to that shim. And we can replace that end cap or end bell and kind of redo what we did before and make sure it's installed. Now we'll go ahead and assemble the rotor and the centrifugal switch. So it has these two governors that fly out on the sides, and they've got little pointed ends that point towards the center shaft, and those lock into place on that plastic sliding piece. You've got these little felt washers that are supposed to go between the mount and the governors, and then the pin goes through them. So aligning all that's kind of a pain in the butt. And then you've got the two springs. They just hook on those pins. And then we'll shoot a little super slick stuff on there. Make sure everything's functional and sliding nicely. All right, so next we need to install this retaining ring on the terminal end of the rotor. That's what stops the bearing from traveling any further down on the rotor shaft, or the rotor traveling too far outside of the motor. And we'll just line up that shaft with the ball bearing and slide it in there. Make sure we got some good rotation going. So here we are with the other end, and it gets all of the remaining shims and then the spring washer, and then we'll install the bearing in there. And we need to make sure that bearing's fully seated, and there should be some flex to that bearing. Install that other retaining ring and then slide that end bell on there. Then line up the holes for the stator bolts or stator screws. Put the nut on the other end. We'll do that for all 4 of them, and then we'll tighten those down, and that'll compress the motor together. Too easy. Make sure we got some good rotation going there. All right, so next we need to install the capacitor. And if you marked everything when you took it all apart, putting it back together should be relatively easy. Install the capacitor inside that capacitor cover, and then we'll screw the cover down. All right, the only thing that's left is to test the motor. So let's get some power to it, check it with a screwdriver, and make sure we're not going to shock ourselves. Flip it on. It's rotating. It's not smoking. Listen for that click. And we are good to hook. So next, we're going to install the keyway on the shaft and then the pulley. And as I'm watching this, I just realized that I'm installing that pulley upside down. So I'm going to have to go correct that after we get done making this video. So we'll just tighten that down with the set screw. But that pulley is actually supposed to be the other way around. It's supposed to be opposite from the spindle pulley assembly. Lastly, this didn't work out like I wanted it to. This was the original decal, the crown logo decal. I'm just using some of this Loctite spray adhesive. I'm going to cover the back side of this decal. Now, I could have reached out to my buddy Matt Blast over on Garage Journal and have him make me up one, and it would look perfect. But I didn't. So then I tried to apply this thing to the motor, and it goes on there and it ends up staying, but it doesn't look anywhere near as good as I wanted it to. Not the end of the world. But all that work on painting the motor, and then you get this. I tried to clean it up a little bit with some alcohol, but yeah. All right, so next we're just going to attach the motor to the motor mount. And I went ahead and bought some new hardware for this. These are just 1/4 by 20 carriage bolts. They're each 1 inch long, with nuts and washers. I'll just tighten that down. And we can set the motor aside. All right, so this is the wiring diagram for the OEM, or the way that it's supposed to go. And this is the wiring diagram for the switch mounting plate that I'm modifying with a second switch. And this allows us to wire in the switch on a different draw so that we can turn the light on without turning the motor on. So we're just attaching the wire stress relief to the power cord. I'm using a new power cord. And I've got both of those wiring diagrams linked in the description of the video below. So here we are just cutting some additional wiring because the switches we've got don't have wires on them. And then we'll attach some blade terminals to the ends of them. That's how they're going to connect to the switches. All right, and here we are just inserting the wire stress relief and power cable into the switch plate. And it's going to take a little bit of force there. We're good to hook. So now we'll install the outlet. Just snaps right in there. Then we can install the two switches. And they just snap right in. Then we can start connecting the wires to the blade terminals on the switches. Then we can install the lamp socket. And then we'll start connecting the wires according to the wiring diagram. We'll put some butt terminals on them and hold them together with a zip tie. So as long as you follow that wiring diagram, you should have no issues. So now we'll put a bulb in there and plug in a heat gun and test this. So we'll put power to it, make sure we're not going to shock ourselves, and then the motor switch turned on the heat gun and the lamp switch turned on the lamp. And they turned them off as well. So we're good to hook. Next this wasn't on the OEM, but I wanted to label each one of these switches. One with a lamp or a light and one with motor. So I cut these labels out on my vinyl cutter. Probably would have been better to title that one lamp instead of light, but you get the idea. And we can remove the clear transfer tape. Then we've got the motor one. And once we get that motor on there, then we'll be done. So that's going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we will be assembling the sub-assemblies. That's a mouthful. And getting on with the assembly of the drill press. So as always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you guys next time.